um, with the tribes that have and do continue to call what we now know as New Jersey their ancestral home. So tonight we get the great pleasure of exploring theater and Native American expression in theater. And to get us started, I'm really excited to introduce Deontay Griffin Quick from the New Jersey Theater Alliance to introduce our first speaker. Deontay, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Sarah. Good evening, everyone. My name is Deontay Griffin Quick. I use he, him, his pronouns, and I'm the Director of Programs and Services for New Jersey Theater Alliance. And as a quick visual description, I am a Black male in my early 20s. I have caramel skin, and I'm currently wearing a tan colored buttoned up shirt. And I just want to give a special thanks to Sarah and the New Jersey Historical Commission for supporting tonight's event, Indigenous Theater Makers in Conversation. This is our third year partnering with the Historical Commission to offer panel discussions highlighting the leadership and artistry of theater makers in New Jersey and within our communities. And we're really looking forward to bringing you these kinds of conversations and many more to come in the following years. And I want to let folks know, if you that are watching tonight, if you have questions for any of our panelists during the conversation, please use the Q&A feature that's at the bottom of your screen. And you may also access the closed captions provided by Mirabai Knight of Total Caption by clicking the CC icon at the bottom of your screen. Before we begin tonight's conversation, I would like to offer a land acknowledgement on behalf of New Jersey Theater Alliance. The language we're using for tonight's acknowledgement was created actually in consultation and guidance from Reverend Dr. John Norwood, our moderator for this conversation. And he's of the Nanticoke tribe, and he has been partnering with us over the past several months for several of our initiatives, and we're extremely grateful for his wisdom and generosity and collaboration in these efforts. And we're honored to continue working with him in friendship and in collaboration for panels such as the one we're hosting tonight. So I would like to offer that we are gathering today from many locations, but for those of us physically in New Jersey, we are acknowledging that we are on the traditional territory of the Lenni-Lenape Indigenous people of this land. We honor the Lenape tribal communities that still remain in their homelands and those of the diaspora that were forced to migrate away. We respectfully acknowledge that from ancient times, the Lenape have lived in relationship with these lands and the waters, and we pause to show our respect for their ancestors who lived here before, the Lenape people of today, and their generations to come. Thank you. Without further ado, it is my great honor and privilege to introduce Reverend Dr. John Norwood, who will be moderating this evening's discussion. Reverend Dr. John Norwood is a citizen of the Nanticoke Lenape tribe, for which he has served as the principal justice of the tribal Supreme Court and as a councilman. And as a senior minister of the Nanticoke Lenape Tribal Christian Prayer Circle Ministry, Dr. Norwood regularly represents his tribe at national and international levels. He is the co-chair of the Task Force on the Federal Acknowledgement on the National Congress of American Indians and the General Secretary of the Alliance of Colonial Era Tribes. Since 1992, he has served as the senior pastor of the Ujima Village Christian Church in Ewing, New Jersey. Dr. Norwood is a tribal historian, cultural presenter, writer, drummer, and craftsman. He has lectured at many academic institutions and has been featured in multiple documentaries, has testified before the United States Congress and published numerous articles on theology, American Indian history, culture, and current concerns. Dr. Norwood is a graduate of Howard University in Washington, D.C., Princeton Theological Seminary in Princeton, New Jersey, and the Northwest University in South Africa. So again, thank you, Dr. Norwood, for your time and your collaboration, and I will turn things over to you.
Thank you so much, Deontay. It's a pleasure to be here again. Thank you for welcoming me to moderate this particular discussion. I also want to thank Erica Nagel, your colleague with NJTA, and also Sarah Curitan and Greer Luce from the New Jersey Historical Commission, who I've also worked with on many occasions. Tonight is a special night And I'm thrilled because I'm more of a fan of theater than an artist like those that will be on our panel this evening. Just want to introduce each and every one of our panelists. The first is Ryan Victor Pierce, or Apalaniatet, who is a member of the Nanticoke Lenni-Lenape tribal nation. And he is, in 2012, he founded the Eagle Project, a theater company dedicated to exploring American Indian identity through the performing arts and Native American heritage. He's performed in workshops and productions at such renowned theatrical institutions as the New York Dramatists, La Mama ETC, and New York City Opera at Lincoln Center. In November 2020, Apalaniatet made history by giving the first ever Lenape land acknowledgement at the Macy's Thanksgiving Parade on NBC. Apalaniatet holds a degree from New York University's Tisch School of the Arts and will be entering the doctoral program for theater and performance studies at the City University of New York Graduate Center in this coming fall. Madeleine Sayett is a citizen of the Mohegan tribe and the executive director of the Yale Indigenous Performing Arts Program, clinical assistant professor with the Arizona Center for Medieval and Renaissance Studies at Arizona State University, and co-artistic director of Red Eagle Soaring Native Youth Theater. For her work as a theater maker, she has been honored as a Forbes 30 Under 30 in Hollywood Entertainment, the NCAIED Native American 40 Under 40, TED TED Fellow, and recipient of the White House Champion of Change Award from President Obama. Her play, Where We Belong, produced by Woolly Mammoth Theater Company in association with the Folger Shakespeare Library, is currently available to stream online. Delana Studi is a proud city of the Cherokee Nation. She is an actor and playwright whose TV credits include Dreamkeeper, Edge of America, Shameless, General Hospital, Z Nation, and Goliath. Her theater credits include the first national Broadway tour of August, Osage County, as well as off-Broadway's Informed Consent and Gloria, a life. She retraced her family's footsteps along the Trail of Tears with her father and wrote her play, And So We Walked, which is currently on tour. She is the chair of the SAG-AFTRA's National Native Americans Committee and the artistic director of Native Voices at the Autry. DeLanna has been devoted to social justice work and youth, and she has partnered with many community organizations and with programs supporting artistic expression and social justice in her own Native community. Welcome to each and every one of you. We're very excited to have you here on this panel. I just want to begin by asking if any of you would like to talk a little bit about any of your current projects or anything in the past that you think would be particularly pertinent for this discussion today. Don't all jump at once.
Well, I'll jump in the deep end first. Well, yeah, I just want to jump in and say that coming up in the end of July, there is a performing arts project sponsored by Lincoln Center Performing Arts and curated by the office. And basically it's called You Are Here, which is bringing people back to the theater from the pandemic. And as a Lenape person, I am doing it's a land acknowledgement, but it's performing a land acknowledgement on top of a spoken word piece that I also wrote. And and it's not just me, but I'm thinking that I find it interesting that they're taking a Native lead on this coming back to the theater in terms of getting back to storytelling, getting back to community, getting back to certain values that I believe are based in indigeneity. And so it is my hope, and I'm not the only Native, by the way, performing in this. Also, Muriel Miguel of the Spider Woman Theater, though they will also be there. So anyway, so it is my hope that that this just is not a blip and like, okay, we want to make it seem like we're getting off on a different foot after the pandemic, but that this is a beginning of a new era. As I have heard some of our native elder performing artists say recently, we feel like we've kind of been there before, where we thought we were on the cusp of something new and different, and unfortunately, they say we weren't. So hopefully after the worst pandemic in a century, and with some wonderful opportunities that I do see coming in across Rhode Island, hopefully this can be the start of something different.
Thank you. Hopefully it can be. Hopefully it can be. Would anyone else like to share?
Sure. So currently streaming online from the Folder and Woolly Mammoth Theater Company is my solo show Where We Belong, which was actually never originally supposed to be a play. It actually was created because as a Mohegan person, there was this moment in time where I essentially traveled to the UK to study Shakespeare and the sort of ways in which the colonization manifests over time between the relationship between British colonialism and American colonialism, and how that transcends to our present day, left me in this strange arrival after I went on that journey, thinking about how it related to the journeys of my ancestors who had to go to the UK in the 1700s on diplomatic missions in service of our people. And so the play winds its way around in various capacities. It's also the journey of a wolf who becomes a bird, because Mohegan means wolf people, but my name Achokais means blackbird, and what that means and how that's related to flying and leaving home when I was raised with an understanding that there's no way to say that you left home in our language, that the land that you're made of is actually like a physical part of you. And so the reason I'm really excited about this piece, even though it terrifies me performing it anytime I have to do it, because I don't get to be someone else, is that it deals very directly with the erasure of Indigenous peoples in the Northeast, and the fact that growing up as a Native person in Connecticut, I was constantly being told by people that I didn't exist. And what is that to grapple with constantly, to actually have to prove your existence on a day-to-day basis, and to come to a reckoning of the fact that the reason why I grew up performing Shakespeare was because there were plenty of opportunities to perform Shakespeare growing up, but there were no opportunities to learn my Mohegan language, and that society was very intentionally valuing certain things and devaluing other things. And so I've been excited by the responses to this piece, because I think that what I was able to do through my own mental grappling and struggle was actually create access for some folks to these questions that they're not necessarily exploring all the time, but I think have a lot of relevance for folks who've been, for both myself and then for other Northeastern Native folks who've dealt with similar forms of erasure.
Thank you. I'm going to probably follow up on some of the things that you just mentioned in our discussion. Delana Studi, would you like to share anything in particular?
Of course. And to start, I want to actually acknowledge Madeline and the work that she's done. I had the privilege of reading the play and then also seeing it. So if you haven't seen it yet, I suggest you go and watch it. It's truly remarkable. And the writing and the story, it resonates deep within my soul. So I just want to acknowledge that and say, wado, Madeline. Native Voices has a lot of wonderful things on the horizon. In fact, I think this will be the first time, I know this will be the first time I'm announcing this out loud. So we just got the news today. Well, it just was released today, so I can share it. But we were part of 5 theaters that received the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation grant to create Generation Now. It'll include, it's a partnership between Native Voices, Penumbra, the Mayu Theater Company, the Latino Theater Company, and of course the Children's Theater Company in Minneapolis. And we will be commissioning and developing 16 new plays by Black, Indigenous, Latinx, and Asian American Pacific Islander writers for multi-generational audiences. So that was our news that we found out today. And so I'm very excited to share that. We are always trying to find ways to be more inclusive at Native Voices, and also how do we become more intersectional, especially since a lot of our people are. And so that's our brand new news to share. I know that Erica posted in the chat about our Festival of New Plays. We have one more left. That'll be tomorrow night. You can find information about that at Native Voices. You can go to the autry.org/Native Voices. And of course, our spring production, The New Adventures of Super Indian, has been extended and it's running until July 28th, and it stars our very own Madeleine Sayett. You can hear her voice in that as well, and several other actors. And that will be an audio experience that will be around until July 28th because of popular demand. So we have some exciting things that we get to share today, and we also have some exciting things that we hope to be able to share in the near future. But it's just wonderful to be here and also to be part of this conversation that is all about building bridges and connections and communication. So Wado, thank you for this opportunity.
Congratulations. It's a wonderful, wonderful opportunity that you're extending, and congratulations on the funding and the collaboration. As we've been talking, have any of you found that recently, let's say over the past 5 to 10 years, that there have been more openings for Indigenous expression in the arts? I know that while there were many expressions about Indigenous people when I was growing up, very few of them were actually made by Indigenous people. And while we have some artists from 50, 60 years ago that were able to have their works on screen and in theater, have you found that the progress has been significant in recent years, and has there been any particular change that you're excited about?
I mean, I think that the change in the last 5 years has been immense, right? I feel like in 2015, I would have had no problem saying that the predominant form of Native representation on the American stage was still red face, 100%. And that wasn't very long ago at all. You know, that's not to say that Native theater wasn't being made, as it was always being made. But when it came to mainstream institutions, right, as recently as 2015, their expectation was red face, or that if they were hiring Native artists, that they would give them some version of the feathers and fringe world that they were, you know, hoping for. And so I think that transformation has been immense, and I think a lot of it has to do with the moment in time. I think a lot of it has to do with what happened after Standing Rock and the way that shifted people's attention. You know, I think the artists who are making work right now, like myself, like Ryan, like DeLanna, are very lucky in that we are being heard, whereas, you know, our elders and the generations that came before us were doing just as much work, if not more so, but being erased and being silenced for that action that they were taking. And so I think it's really exciting to see what's possible right now. I feel like also it's creating a really exciting moment that we've now, you know, gotten to get past all of the nonsense of what their expectation of our representation will be to tell our stories. But now, like, what's the next level of moving past stories that have to address our history and have to address our trauma to the stories where we can actually really experience Indigenous joy? That's what I'm really excited about moving forward.
I would say that yes. I mean, there certainly is more awareness going on, and I think, you know, there are more panels going on like this. Organizations like Theater Communications Group is certainly getting more involved in Native theater and Native issues. Like, for example, here in New York, there was a Native playwright, Larissa Fasthorse, that had a play off Broadway, Playwrights Horizon. So there, you know, little by little, things are happening. Now, I am going to kind of pair that with sometimes the more things happen, the more they stay the same. Like, for example, the play that was done here in New York, it had no Native characters, it had no Native actors. I would still say, and this is, again, I'm speaking on my personal experience in and around the New York City metro area, many Native plays can have readings and workshops, but there definitely seems to be a ceiling that needs to be broken. Now, you know, it's true, we're on an arc of justice, I guess. Maybe we're not there yet. However, this still seems to be a very hard ceiling from which to break. And I'm still investigating, and I imagine we all are, as to why that exists and what could be done to break through that. I'll share another very personal example. I wrote a play that I started about 6 years ago called This Play is Native Made, and has had workshops, you know, through my company Eagle Project and the American Indian Community House here in New York City, Primary Stages, an off-Broadway company, hosted a reading, but no theater in Lenapehoking or on Turtle Island would touch it. The only theater that really kind of gave it the jump start and actually produced a production in the summer of 2019 was Ashtar Theater in Ramallah, Palestine. So that gives you something about how still there is this this tenaciousness, not tenaciousness, that's not the word, but nervousness, I would say, in terms of touching certain Native subjects, that, you know, that I had to go, and look, I'm delighted that Ashtar did it, but it just shows how far sometimes someone has to go to get some Native work to break through. So I think, you know, yeah, I you know, certainly compared to like when I started Eagle Project, you know, 9 years ago, there certainly is a lot more happening, but I still think there still is a very hard ceiling that you know, that I hope we're on the cusp of breaking soon.
I agree. You know, speaking of 2015, I want to say that was the year that we had 3 Native plays open in the state of Oregon by 3 Native women. And it was the first time all of those theaters, well, except for one, Oregon Shakespeare Festival had already produced a play by a Native playwright, but not a Native woman playwright. And so it was the first time these Native women were on stage and being produced by non-Native theaters. And it just always shocks me to know that it's 2015 and that was the first time anyone produced a Native play by a Native woman. I'm sure, or I'm sorry, a lot of Native theaters have been doing that since time immemorial, but let's just, you know, for non-Native theaters to do that, it was a big deal. And the fact that that happened in 2015 says a lot about where we are. We have seen some major changes. You know, television shows are being created by our people, with our people, and theaters doing the same thing. And of course, you know, we are producing our own works and sharing them, and hopefully they'll get life outside of our Native theaters. But how do we bridge that gap? How do we get our playwrights seen by other theaters? How do we get our actors seen by other theaters? How do we get people to hire our Native designers for any project and not just be for a Native play? And so even though we're booking work, it's usually work for Native people by Native people. It'd be nice if we could be incorporated into other work as well, because our talent is a wide range of talents and we can cover everything.
I just want to add 2 quick things onto what DeLanna just said. One is that was actually 2018, which I think says something about how recent the change was between 2015 and 2021, right? If that moment didn't come until 2018, it feels like it was a long time ago because there have been things happening since that moment, but actually it was very, very recent. And to Ryan's point, my show originally was actually produced as part of a festival in the UK dedicated to Indigenous arts. And that's how it ended up at Shakespeare's Globe. And it was because it was in the UK that then it got attention back here, right? Like if I had just sent it to a bunch of American theaters, like there's no American festival of Indigenous arts in like New York City the way that there is in London. And like, that's not an accident. So just thinking about some of those mechanisms, just to lift up both what Delana and Ryan were saying.
No, thank you, Maddie. I was just commenting that you would think I would have known that year, but alas, no.
Do any of you feel a tension or a pressure to, on the one hand, always have your work be culturally focused, culturally centered, have some sort of a cultural message, so that you are always the Indigenous artist as opposed to an artist, that there's some line that the norm is not you, you're something more exotic, versus your sense of responsibility to bring forth the issues and the stories of your people? And how do you negotiate that?
Okay. The thing that I tried to do, I feel like most of my early career was dedicated to trying to unbox what people were expecting me to do. And so the thing that I tried to do more than anything else was think about how do I apply Mohegan philosophy to whatever it is that I'm doing. So what are the ways that we're actually dismantling colonial systems in ways that nobody else expects? Because I am always beholden to my people, but I also am not always going to be making work that anyone who's not Mohegan would be able to identify as Mohegan, right? Like, the things that make me Mohegan are not the things that anyone in the world would have been trained to think of as such. And so I'm always thinking about that. I also was thinking a lot recently about how when trying to explain to non-Native people what the sort of feeling is of representation that you're carrying. When I was an intern in the cultural department at my tribe, as like a 16, 17-year-old, the first thing we did every morning was we cut out every single reference to Mohegan in the newspapers and we saved them. every single one. And what that means is that I know that anything I do is going to be cut out and saved. And so the sense of cultural responsibility that gives you when, like, you know, your aunties and your uncles and everyone is going to be like, well, Mohegan was in the newspaper today. That's what Maddie was doing, is very different than an artist that doesn't have that kind of accountability to a specific nation, right? And so I just think about that a lot lately as an example, because it was terrifying me when my show just came out. I was like, oh man, what are they going to think? Because I knew they were going to know about it. You know, there was no world in which they didn't know every single thing that I was doing. And so I think about those two things. One, the like immense amount of accountability that I have to always be acting as a sort of like mini diplomat, even if I don't want to be, for my tribal nation. And then also this thing of like, okay, but how do I completely shatter the non-natives world's expectations of what it is to be me?
I've recently started writing pieces that aren't Native centric. And I jokingly say they are Native because I'm writing them, but and so I'm learning to write non-Native pieces that are technically Native in nature, if that makes any sense. And it's been challenging, I will admit that. And then I think one of the other challenges that I face whenever I go into a room, and I don't want to speak for everyone else, but I know that because of the work that I do in Indian country, people expect me to be the ambassador of all things Native. And I jokingly say I'm not even an expert in my own culture, let alone anyone else's. And so I'm still learning things about my Cherokee people, let alone I would know nothing about so many other tribes. And so just having that outside expectation of non-Native theaters to expect you to know everything that there is to know about all of our beautifully diverse sovereign nations, and even the nations that aren't federally recognized, we're talking about 1,000 different groups of people. And so of course we're not going to know everything, but there's this idea that we're a monolith and that we're all going to have the same ideas and agree with each other all the time, and that puts a lot of pressure and burden on people. And how do we show that we have this beautiful diversity inside our own communities, and how do we get to having those conversations? And you know, I do think people still want to see what they classify as being Native American. They want that image on the Buffalo nickel. And unfortunately, you know, well, I guess I say fortunately, I don't look that way. So, you know, that's true. So many of our people. And so how do we get seen for who we are today and not what we've always been in the past? And I think that's part of the erasure that we're talking about, because it's not uncommon for me to say I'm Cherokee, and the follow-up question is, oh, how much? And I have to quantify my existence. And I can't think of any other group of people that has to do that.
I would say that recently, and the more I work and the more I create, I'm starting to not see as much of a difference. I'm finding that my objective as a personal artist, in many cases, especially recently, is in step with the cultural interests, or what I imagine the cultural interests are of my nation. You know, as because you know personally, just speaking personally, you know, the erasure, as Maddie said earlier, in the Northeast, it has been so great that the journey, and it's really like a life's journey and an artist's journey to kind of unearth that, and kind of, you know, and to learn it and to rediscover it for myself. There's nothing more fulfilling than that. And I find out more about who I am, what makes me, what makes my family, what makes my community. And you know, right now I just have to say they are one, or they should be. And honestly, at this point, nothing else really matters. You know, that's I would say what I do try to, you know, just as a theater artist, is try to balance you know, well, for lack of a better word, like education sometimes with not like preaching, and not just, you know, class, this is theater, this is engaging, it's entertaining. So how can, you know, and obviously we're talking to a populace that, you know, is in some ways is still learning that we're still here. So how do you try to balance those? And so I try to do that with a one-act play I recently wrote called Tulip Tree Canoes and Oysters Too, which Dr. Norwood, you were certainly an inspiration in, in writing that, among other things. So, full disclosure. So yeah, and I think that is one thing where in that play, the Lenape character kind of uses his heritage not only to save himself, but also a fellow student who isn't Native. And so together they find a common ground, and they both help each other out in, you know, in their own way. So so anyway, I mean, that's my personal feeling on it. A few years ago, I might have felt differently, but that's how I feel right now.
So given the challenges on you personally, you know, and you may, the fact that each of you not only is Indigenous, but is just human. And, you know, you're talking about how you sometimes wind up feeling like you're the unofficial ambassador or diplomat for either your nation or all Indigenous nations. What does it look like to you to decolonize theater? And how might that free you in any particular way?
So something I think about a lot when I think about this question is the extreme amount of brainwashing that had to occur in order for me as a kid to think that there was theater and then there was traditional storytelling and that they weren't related. That you know, growing up, those were separate spheres of existence. And I think that I've been thinking about a lot now, you know, how when you go to a store, so you go to a bookstore, if you live in a town where bookstores still exist right now in the 21st century, but if you go to a bookstore and you go into like the you can see a bajillion editions of Shakespeare plays, but there's no world in which you're going to find a Native playwright in there. And that is so intentional. You know, that comes from years and years of our arts being made illegal while Shakespeare was made required. And so when I think about like, we're so far right now in terms of an actual like mainstream theater industry from the ability to decolonize, because at this moment, like, we're still shouting to even be heard that we exist. And for me, like, the creative sovereignty of an actual Native theater that is like rich and full of life and vibrant and in the future is about like every single Indigenous nation being fully represented in the place in which they are. Like, you should never be on the land and not know the stories of the land in which you're standing, right? Like, that is fundamental. Like, why, when you go to any other like nation in the world, you immediately are encountering the arts and culture of that place, but here it's completely silenced, right? And there's no place in America where you go to an Indigenous arts center, right? Where that is the actual space in which they're celebrating that. Instead, it's a museum, or it's something that's putting us behind glass cages and saying that we're dead. And so what is that world that we're imagining forward to, right? We're not only a few, not only a couple local tribes represented at a predominantly white institution, but every single one of those hundreds and hundreds of federally recognized nations, and the ones who haven't been able to receive federal recognition, right? That they all are able to tell their stories fully and with creative sovereignty. And with creative sovereignty meaning that there aren't outside white institutions coming in and telling them how their stories must be told. That they're actually setting the terms for how stories are told about their people on their land, and no one's walking around assuming that there have never been stories here and wondering what the names of the streets around them mean, but that actually the stories of the land that we're on are lifted up and celebrated. And I feel like that future is out there, and people's mindsets are starting to shift a little bit at a time to realizing the disconnect from the land underneath them, but there's still so far to go. And so when I think about decolonizing theater practices, it's so immense, because it's like, we can't really do it within the institutions that currently exist, right? It has to really come from our own nations and our own people, and the specificity of every single one of those cultures and languages, the languages that come from the earth that we're standing on and that speak to us in their terms, right? Not the languages from somewhere else. So that's a little bit of what I think about when I think about those systems.
I would say in terms, I mean, first of all, decolonization, I mean, that's such a huge word, and I think there are many facets to that. I mean, there's decolonizing probably on a cultural level, on a financial level, on a structural level, on a hierarchy, you know, everything. I just want to share one project that we're doing this Wednesday that I think may be the start or one start of possible decolonization. On this Wednesday, June 30th at 8 p.m. Eastern, Eagle Project, we're collaborating with an organization called Donkey Saddle, and we're doing something called Storytelling for Liberation. And it's a very informal online event where there'll be Native American artists, African American artists, Palestinian artists, all giving spoken word poems and personal stories, narrations of their life around kind of their community, their community's struggle with various aspects of colonization. These are works in progress. It's beautiful. They're visceral. Very poetic. Some are funny. Some are, they're all over the map. But I think, and everyone involved is not necessarily an actor. Some are actors. Some are activists. Some are artists. Some are, they're from various walks of life in their community. But they're sharing these beautifully written stories that have been kind of worked on and shared over the course of a couple of years. And so this Wednesday will be the first time kind of sharing that. And I think, something like that where these great stories, they don't necessarily always have to go through what we think of as the professional, theater hierarchy, or even the nonprofit hierarchy, which in some ways can just be another form of oligarchy. It can be just as a very democratic, organic way of community and community members sharing their stories and finding the most expressive, visceral way, an honest way by which to share them. So I just want to share that as one example of something that could lead to decolonization.
And, for me, I think it's just a simple story structure, honestly. I mean, everything that they said, I'm just adding on to, but the right to tell our stories our own way, which means it doesn't fit the westernized norm. And to have Native critics that will watch this and know our Native way of storytelling, because usually when it's viewed through a white lens, it's viewed as not enough. And one day, I mean, it's my goals are really simple these days. It's one day is I would like to have a Native play in every lineup in every theater, regional, Broadway, etc. At least one, and I don't think that's asking for a lot. Right now, we're lucky to get slid into the I call it the BIPOC slot. Most theaters have that one where they do their special. We're going to be doing our special people of color slot, and we're going to select this play this year. Next year we'll do one from this group, and the next year we'll do one from that group. And so unless it's a culturally specific theater, you're not going to be able to see a wide variety of different playwrights from that group. And so how do we change that? How do we get these stories out there? And of course, a lot of universities are now teaching Native playwrights, and I feel like they should do more, obviously. But my goal in the theater world is simple: is I just want our playwrights to be seen across the nation as just playwrights, and not because they're writing a Native piece. Their nativeness is going to be shining through wherever they are. We can't hide that, try if we might. That's just who we are. It's in our DNA. And so just to be able to have a play and have it not be a common thing where we have to celebrate every time one of us does something that is considered the first would be wonderful. I would like to celebrate the many. So that's, one of my steps I would like to see.
Yeah. If I may just briefly add to that, I know in one of our meetings I wrote something of tokenism of the unicorn, and I think that's something that we all need to be very wary of. I mean, obviously, look, we all cheer the opportunities that anyone in our community gets, and we need more of that. But we don't want to we don't want to fall into the kind of Euro-American capitalistic trap where, one person or maybe two, get all this notoriety and all and all this buzz and all this work. And then everyone's like, okay, great, it's done. You see, we did it. We decolonized. We have a Native person up there, and all said and done. And that, and I imagine that's not what our Native communities are about, and that's not what we should be about.
Part of the process of decolonizing is not only in dealing with those who are non-Indigenous and correcting the presumptions and the errors of history and making them aware of the current pressures, but also how we can use theater as our own medicine, and how it can heal, and how we can share stories that, the process of colonization that continues today. Not only did it take land from us, and not only did it alienate us from many of these spaces, but it alienated us from one another. And how do you see your work as medicine, just like the stories of our ancestors were viewed as medicine?
I think about this a lot. My mom is the medicine woman of my tribe, and my great aunt was the medicine woman before her. So I think a lot about how story is used as part of traditional healing practices. You know, that it's not always separate, you know, from other things. That actually, like, a story could be the thing that heals someone. And often, when we're telling stories in community, we are thinking about them in that way. That this is the story that needs to be told for the community in this moment. And how do we apply that to our theater practice in terms of both exchange? And I remember I really started really thinking about this for the first time in this really deep way, watching Mary Catherine Nagel's Sliver of a Full Moon, because in it, these incredible survivors who testified to get the Violence Against Women Act passed in 2013, they tell their stories from their own lives again. And you would think that that was something that would create like sadness or grief in the audience as they leave, but instead you could always see the audience leave motivated to make change, because that act of story medicine was so clear and so powerful that it like woke up everybody around them and activated all of them through the act of them telling those stories. And I think about that a lot with traditional storytelling as a form too, and the ways that simply gathering people together, that exchange of story medicine between audience and speaker, that the people in the audience are bringing their entire lived experience with them to that space. And when I think about all of that, I think, thank you for bringing that up, because it really actually, in thinking about decolonization processes, always brings up for what to me is the most profound difference between when I think about our stories as Mohegan people and like Western theatric practices, and what I need to constantly be doing in my work to try and break them down, which is think about how every story we're telling does bring us toward healing. Because there are so many stories that bring us toward harm or aren't actually contributing something that communities need, or isn't crafted in a way that has that intentionality. And so if we're constantly thinking about how do the stories we tell bring us closer to the world, to a healed world, to the world we need to get to, how are we constantly thinking about what our ancestors passed down to us and what we're setting up for the generations that come forward to imagine in how we're telling our stories? That's what I always think about when I think about story medicine. And I think it's so significant because I also feel like right now in this pandemic moment, it was even changing, because I had initially thought that could only happen if I was speaking something and someone was hearing it and I could recognize the exchange. But then suddenly what happened, right, was all of these events everyone was hosting, folks like Ryan and Delana, all these people were hosting online. All of these people showed up who would have never been able to hear those stories otherwise. And you could see that exchange happening on this like new way, in this new level. And I was thinking about, wow, if I was 17 years old and I had gone online and these readings were happening and I could have heard that story then, like, what would that have transformed in everything that came after? And so I think that story is always medicine. And so we have to be very careful with how we wield it for that reason. But I also think what's really interesting right now is seeing actually how the nature of that medicine has been changing within these different dynamics that we're operating in.
Absolutely. And I love what Madeline had to say about Sliver of a Full Moon by Mary Catherine Nagel. I've done a lot of work with Native American boarding school survivors. My father is one, and I worked for an organization that collected the histories from Native American boarding school survivors. So we don't lose that part of history. And of course, it really resonates today with what's going on. But one of the most powerful things in all of the work I've done with survivors, both with Native American boarding schools and also rape and trauma victims, is when you can tell your own story in your own words, you have power over that narrative, and that narrative doesn't have power over you. And so being able to tell your story in your own words is actually very empowering. And so being able to share that story with others enables them to feel empowered to share their story. And so I was just on a panel, we were talking about stories as medicine, and one of the panelists, Dr. Bethany Hughes, said, it's not like penicillin, you know, you don't take it whenever you get sick. It's more like a vitamin. You take it every day. you know, and it's, if you remember that, if it's something that's supposed to be part of your daily nourishment, it takes this whole idea of like, ooh, Native people and their, you know, new agey medicine, which don't get me started on that. That's a whole other conversation for a whole other time, and I apologize. Moving on. But it puts it more into the today world and not into this mystic realm. And a lot of people like to either keep us in the past or in this mystic realm. And the truth is, we're everyday people living now. And so anytime we can talk about how we incorporate our what people would consider ceremony, but it's honestly our day-to-day life routine. It's like how some people have morning prayers or evening prayers. It's the same way with us, and it doesn't make us really any you know, with this exotic thing out there. So, you know, going back to what Maddie was saying, and storytelling and being on that stage and sharing those stories, you know, also part of us is being able to reclaim those stories and to tell the stories in our own way. You know, my father is currently in the other room watching Westerns from the 1950s and 60s, probably Chuck Connors as Geronimo. And it's because of his boarding school life. That's on Wednesday nights in boarding school, he would get to watch Westerns. And of course, they did it to show the Native kids that the Cowboys always won. And of course that, yeah. And so, but that's something my father carries with him because it was the one time he got to socialize with his friends in boarding school. So how do we change that? How do we move forward with that? And also, you know, acknowledge the elders, and that my father, even though he went through this tragic experience, that's something he still holds dear. And even though I find it very problematic, it's something he holds dear. And so, you know, learning to bridge those gaps as well. How do we, you know, once again, we're not a monolith. And we're having these conversations hopefully every day. And they're not always easy. But I do think, you know, owning the story, telling the story, and having the right to tell the story. I think that's the other thing, is we've been silenced for so long. And, you know, that's one thing at Native Voices we fight against. We fight against people being silenced. And so how do we uplift and amplify these Native voices who have so many beautiful stories to tell, and they've never had a chance to tell them? And so how do we get to share them? So that's, you know, that's my story about medicine. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm thinking about you know, a lot of the various Native plays, you know, either that I've seen or and been a part of or produced, and you know, all the above, and there does definitely seem to be a similar theme in that you know, there is either, you know, characters or the artists themselves within those plays that are healed either through telling the story or through going through the journey of the action of the story themselves. They themselves also become healed and become whole, you know, and you know, in other words, like the kind of this colonized world, a capitalistic world, where, you know, everything is about money, right? It you know, sickens people. I mean, and not just natives. I think it sickens a lot of people, and so especially for these Native characters, whether, you know, it be like Pure Native by Vicky Ramirez, or Woodbones by Bill Yellowrobe, Broken Heartland by Vicky Lynn Mooney. You know, I remember, you know, recently, well, a few years ago now, seeing Material Witness at La Mama by Spider Woman. There's always these things where either the leading character, or if it's an ensemble play, the characters go through an extremely cathartic and growth period by reconnecting themselves with who they are and what their community is about and its values. And yeah, I think that's definitely another word of saying that is medicine.
You know, we were talking in regard to being able to express ourselves and heal ourselves and be ourselves in theater, where not only are the writers and directors, but the performers that are portraying Indigenous people are indeed Indigenous people. They're connected with Indigenous communities. There has been a recent move in the diversification of characters, many of whom are historic characters, or characters that portray various periods in history, where there is an effort no longer to try to cast individuals that would be historically representative of those historic figures or that history. Hamilton comes to mind, where you have this diverse cast, and the play has been extremely successful. And in one way, that's wonderful and something to be applauded. In another way, for us, perhaps it raises some concerns, especially since the reference to the fact that you have white actors that portrayed in indigenous people from the past, historic heroes in many instances portrayed by white actors in brownface. How do you feel about that, and people saying, well, it doesn't really have to be a tribal person portraying a tribal person? How does that work these days with your art and the way you're looking at approaching things?
I'll jump in really quickly. I think it's because white men have been playing every role, including white women, forever. And because they have that luxury of playing anything that they wanted to back in the day, right? They could be men, they could be women, you name ethnicities, they could be it. And our people only recently have been able to play themselves, because for so long, those roles that were supposed to be for Native people were played by, once again, white men playing something other than themselves. And so I think the reason why you'll see a lot of this happening in Indian country is because there's such a scarcity of roles. It would be different if we were on every sitcom and every drama, if there was a Native role everywhere, not just a Native role, but every TV show, every movie had at least 3 or 4 Native characters, like the equivalent to what we have with white characters. I think if we had that, what's what I'm looking for, but it's because of the scarcity of the roles. There aren't that many. And so whenever someone that's not Native gets it, or someone that didn't grow up in community, or someone that outwardly just brazenly lies about their ethnicity, it's hurtful. And I like to assume people have good intentions, and I'm not, I'm the furthest one to be the Indian police. But at the same time, I do feel, especially since there is such a scarcity of Native roles, and most of those roles are, while we've seen a wonderful rise in Native people writing parts for Native people, there's still a lot of non-Native people writing for Native people. And if you hire a person that looks like Native but has never had the experience, they're going to play a stereotype, and that's going to be equally hurtful. But if you hire a Native person and you cast them, even in a play or a movie that's written by a non-Native who has no prior experience of what it's like to be Native in America, this person is going to bring their own history to it and create a fully dimensional character. And so, that's my take on it. Once again, I hope, when there comes a time when our Native actors, our Native directors, our Native writers, they're working on so many things that we're not going to be fighting over that one little part, and fighting to be seen and not erased. So hopefully that day will come.
I just want to build on that to say, I think something that's really interesting about the framing in which you asked the question, right, is this thing of using Hamilton as the example, because I have never heard of a Native person getting cast in any of those roles in Hamilton. And in fact, right, Hamilton as a story is a story of Indigenous erasure. It's a play in which, sure, the cast of characters has been diversified, but everything that is happening with Native people alongside that timeline has been erased. And instead, by diversifying those characters, you've painted the founders of America, who are a bunch of genocidal maniacs, as these like cool upstart figures. And to DeLanna's point about the fact that there's so much pressure on any one Native person actually being cast in production, what might have happened had there been a Native actor, an actual Native actor with responsibilities to community in the original cast of Hamilton as a part of those developmental conversations, right? Like, would that have shifted something? And no, it shouldn't always be on the actor. It should be their responsibility to be doing that dramaturgical work. However, it's so common that is the only Native representation in the room, that one Native role, that then suddenly when you're in a situation where that person isn't actually accountable to anyone else, then you've suddenly created a situation in which the equivalent of red face is still happening. You still have a room full of predominantly white folks, or people pretending to be Native, or people who are just playing Native, right? Then just making decisions about how we represent Native people. And so it's not even just a matter of scarcity, of people competing for a single role, but of accuracy and that push to finally have some representation. I feel like the reason why like I'm normally a director, and the reason I became a director instead of an actor is because I wanted to be able to change the terms on which stories are told. But the reason why it's really interesting to actually act my own solo show is it's the only piece I've ever been in where someone can't tell me I'm wrong for being me. You know, that I'm actually allowed to exist as myself, and they can't say I'm too native or not native enough, or I don't look right, or I need to lose some weight, or blah, blah, right? Like these terms within this industry are constantly trying to define people and break them down. And because of America, so much of America's media being predicated on two things. One, red face as genocidal propaganda towards the goal of eliminating Native people, and the predication of the entire film industry on the Hollywood Western as like the major genre of American media. Those two things are so indoctrinated in people's minds that they can't even begin to conceive, unless they're actually coming, you know, unless they're actually a Native person, they can't even begin to conceive of what Native people are. And so to have those people coming in and re-perpetuating these myths and these mythologies and these ideas as us as less than human and unspecific, and it's so easy for it to happen. It will happen every day if you don't actively stop it. And so the reason we need Native people in those roles isn't just to be able to represent themselves, but because basically they are constantly at war with this entire national worldview that is trying to erase their actual essence, even in those situations. And so it's like an incredible burden. Like anytime I hear about an actor having to have a conversation, right? Like, you showed up to be an actor. You didn't show up to have to represent your entire nation and negotiate with producers, like, right? Like that's not your job. And yet actually for so many Native actors, it is, even if it's just getting one accurate phrase in, right? It's that constant push to be able to just make a little bit of change, when in reality, if we had creative producers who were Native on the projects, if we had directors who were Native on the projects, if we had writing teams that were all Native on these projects, if other people weren't constantly taking our control away from us, we wouldn't be putting actors in that position to begin with.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the idea of manifest destiny and white supremacy is so ingrained in American culture, you know, hundreds of years in the making. It shows it rears its ugly head in very obvious ways and sometimes very subtle ways. And sometimes even little microscopic ways within ourselves, like we don't realize that we may be carrying, you know, some sort of bias around. And so, and obviously in the commercial theater and the entertainment industry, it is huge. It is absolutely huge. And so I will say that in my experience, you know, as a performing artist, it can actually, there are many different ways for different formats to work, and I have seen it done. But one of the main things that some of the ingredients that are involved in that is that there has to be a power sharing of whoever's involved, and if it's a white-run theater, white-run organization, or a different kind, that you, like as both Maddie and DeLanna have said, like you have to have the Natives whose story it is in charge, in terms of the narrative, in terms of how it's said, and so that is, and some people can do it. I've seen it done, but obviously many people can't, and so I would say that first and foremost, and yes, until we get to that better place where Native actors, regardless of how they look or what nation they're from or what part of Turtle Island they're from, until we get to that place where we do see all kinds of different Natives in various theaters or film and TV, I do think the priority does need to be for us to play ourselves and for us to play other roles as well. And then, depending on special projects, depending on the format, depending on the power sharing and transparency. Transparency is critical. If there's no transparency, there's nothing else. Unless those things are in place, then the thing that's paramount is to make sure that that we can tell our own stories and find the artistic freedom for ourselves. And I have seen people that maybe used to being in power, when they are open and there's power sharing and there's more, I have seen it where when they are open, they are changed too. And the cast, the creative team, the audiences, everyone benefits from it. So it's not, you know, I feel like many times maybe white run theaters are like, oh, I'm giving something up, and this is dangerous, I don't want this. But no, many times they actually gain from it. They gain something else from it, and their community and their audiences do too. It is scary, I know. It's scary because, like I said, it goes against the manifest destiny of white supremacy that we've all grown up with in various ways. But when it's broken down, it's amazing how human we can all be.
And I think that gets back to what you're saying about decolonize models too. So I just wanted to flag that, right? That it doesn't have to be that there's somebody in charge, right? It can be this shared leadership.
One of the participants raised a couple of questions that seem quite appropriate at this point. And since the part of the issue is having a level of control in Native hands to make some of these changes, one of the questions is how do you get a play about Indigenous persons' struggles produced today? What are the answers? How do you go about that, and why aren't more theaters interested in doing plays about such concerns? So you don't have to go, you know, to the Middle East to find someone to pick up your play.
Well, I would jokingly say if it's written by a native, then they should submit it to our Festival of New Plays, because we do have a selection process where we select plays from across Turtle Island from Indigenous writers, and it goes through a national panel, and we choose 3 plays to develop during our Festival of New Plays, which is currently happening. And so this year we were fortunate enough to actually do 5. And so by the end of the year, I think we're going to be up to 10, which is wonderful. But you know, find Native organizations that are doing it. Also find other theaters that are interested, or if you've seen them do a Native play, remind them that it did well and they should do another one. And honestly, you approach it just like you would produce any other play. You'll find that producing a Native play is very similar to producing any other play. You would hire a language consultant in the event that you were teaching dialects. You would hire a psychologist in the event that there was some psychological issues that were happening. And in this case, ideally, you would hire a Native dramaturg and a Native consultant to be on board. And most importantly, don't put all of that pressure on the actor. You know, and I think that's always beneficial. You know how Madeline was talking about the one actor in the room. I feel like as a Native person, you need to have, if you should never be the only person of your kind in the room. I feel that just across the board. I always jokingly say it should be like Noah's Ark. There should be at least 2, so that way you always have someone's back, right? And someone has your back, and you're not the only one that's crying out anytime something goes wrong. And so I think that's very important to have more than one Native person involved. But once again, what we did when we went to Playpen is we reached out to the local community there and we cast some of the local actors. We also found a way to give back to the local organizations. So find ways to reach out into the community of wherever you're producing the show, and reach out into those Native communities and bring them in. Find out what they need and how you can be of support. And also, you know, give them a chance to audition for these pieces, or even mentor them if they're interested in doing something that's not an actor on stage. If they want to be an assistant director or a stage manager, find a way to bring them into the process.
And I will also just add to that briefly that just knowing that there are this question of like getting something produced, like there are Native people who are who will be your allies in that process, right? Like DeLanna, like Native Voices. They're like over time, like there is accumulating, there are Native staff at certain theaters, there are, you know, there are like Native directors and producers. So it's sort of like as you become more involved with that community, you can find ways to sort of make sure that people have your back, not only in the rehearsal room, but also in the field as a whole. Like who are those people who are going to get excited about your work, who are then going to share it with other people? And to the second part of the question, I think that more theaters in this moment are interested in plays about social justice than previously. And I do think that more theaters are starting to open their minds to what Native theater can be as well. But there is still a long way to go. And so the more you can be in community and the more you can build those relationships, the more likely it is that something will go the distance.
Yeah, I mean, there are a number of wonderful Native-run theaters in the United States and in Turtle Island, and in the United States, you know, like Native Voices at the Autry, like Eagle Project. Like I also give a shout out to New Native Theater with Rimanyazi in Minneapolis. There are many wonderful Native theaters to reach out to. in terms of workshopping and also producing Native work. And so in regards to why other theaters may not do it, I mean, look, I'm very curious too to ask other theaters, well, why don't you do it more? I mean, I would say, you know, more non-native theaters, whether it be in New Jersey or New York or Massachusetts, California, Washington, wherever, you know, collaborate with the native theaters and native communities in your metro area or in your state or in your county. You know, collaborate with them and in terms of resources and cultural equity and create and help create those stories. I mean, that is one way to solve the problem. I mean, I don't think, you know, that, you know, we don't have to be a rocket scientist to kind of figure a way out of this. I think in many ways, we know what the essence is to do. We need to figure out why it's not being done and fix it. I mean, funding, obviously, always, you know, it's people say, well, we always hear funding. Well, they never fix the funding. So we'll keep saying it until it's fixed. You know, there are some aspects and things that that many of us have been working on in terms of trying to fix the equity and funding, but we need allies in that. And I think, you know, it'd be nice to have a panel someday with other theaters on the other side as to why they're not doing that. Do their boards not want to do it? Do they think they can't bring in funding, or are they afraid to share some of that power? All the above. You know, I don't know. We should let them speak for themselves. But anyway, that's what I have to say on that.
And you'll hear a lot of arguments about how Native plays don't bring audiences to the theater. The Native plays I've seen that have been performed in non-Native theaters have always sold out, have had to add extra performances, and also had increased their number of talkbacks. So it's not a matter of, oh, it's not going to bring any money into the theater. It does. People are so thirsty for this story because they've been forced to watch what my father's watching right now. You know, that's what they get. And so in order to hear a Native person share their own story or tell something from their perspective or see a Native family on stage, you're going to get, you know, your usual theater people, but you're also going to get other people from your community that aren't your normal theater goers, especially your Native community. And I think that's another thing we need to, you know, what we need to work on is how do we diversify our audience? How do we start bringing up the next generation of storytellers and also the next generation of audience? And how do we make that how do we diversify and make that inclusive? And so, you know, that's something we're always trying to work on as well. But you'll find that those shows will sell out if you will have them.
Some of the ability to promote the interest in Native theater rests also with those who critique theater overall. One of the questions from the Q&A is if any of you could comment on the importance of having Native critics for Native stories and the importance of that appreciation of the craft more broadly.
I think that it's incredibly important to have Native critics critiquing Native stories. I think that there's a lens shift, right? Like I recognize that also as a reader often, you know, when I'm reading plays, if I'm part of a panel choosing a play for something, I am always imagining a world from what I'm reading or what I'm experiencing based on my own lens. And so lots of times like plays aren't being chosen for certain festivals because there's no Native readers, or because the person choosing is just simply not someone who would ever be a part of that particular story. It's not their taste. There's lots of plays that are great, but they're not my taste, right? And that's true of critics as well. And so I think that the importance of having people who have experience that actually resonates with the story is incredibly important, because if there's somebody who's just seeing themselves as the villain within it, you know, just seeing them who've been raised up until then to expect something very different from Native people and are predominantly angry that Native people aren't living up to their previously, you know, scripted expectations from all of the nonsense that they learned in school, they're not going to review the play in a nuanced fashion. They need to be able to let go of those biases and those expectations. And so I feel like it's very important that there be Native critiques of any play. I mean, I actually got really excited because there was like a surprise Native critique of my play recently, where it was the person happened to be to be Native. And so they started grappling with their own experience inside of the review. And I was like, yeah, like that's what you want. Like that's what's really like, you know, deepening and the experience and resonance. So I think that that's very true. I think that also there's a ton of articles on HowlRound at this point about Native dramaturgy in different fashions, because there's so many Native writers writing blog posts and things and articles related to playwriting on HowlRound, that I think that that's a good place to look for resources in terms of how to think about decolonizing dramaturgical frameworks.
And I just want to put two people in your minds, Courtney Mohler and Dr. Bethany Hughes. Courtney Mohler has written a book called The American Indian Performing Arts, Critical Directions, and several other arts, including Casting a Movement, the Welcome Table Initiative, and of course, you know, Hene Gigama. If you really look for it, you will find all these amazing Native writers who have written about Native theater in some way, shape, or form. But I know Courtney's book, the one I just mentioned, was the one that is the most recent that comes to mind. But like I said, I could be wrong, but these are some names for you to remember: Courtney Mohler, Dr. Bethany Hughes, Hene Gigama. I'm sure there's others that Madeline could probably put in the chat, or Apilana Touch could add. But there's a wealth of knowledge out there.
Yeah, I mean, critics, well, I first of all, I just my personal opinion, I think critics in generally have too much power over theater, but given that you know they are a part of our theater ecosystem, if you will, yes, having someone who's not Native or you know who's you know, a white male in their own, coming with their own biases and their own stereotypes, you know, critiquing a Native play, it can be fraught with problems all on its face. So it is absolutely critical. No, you know, no pun intended. Absolutely critical to have to diversify critics, and to certainly help foster Native critics in terms of both having their having their interest, hopefully their sensitivity and artistic vision, and you know, either along with yours or in terms of helping yours. I mean, I think, you know, in many cases, I think we're aware in theater how sometimes critics, you know, they may know certain playwrights, whether it be a personal relationship or they've just seen a lot of their work. And so they may be primed in many ways to either like them or primed for their world that they write in. And so yeah, Natives we need to have the same thing in our theatrical community.
Another question from the Q&A is, with the new thirst for Black, Indigenous, people of color stories in the American theater field and beyond, there also seems to be an increase in instances of cultural appropriation, misappropriation, and tribal ethnic identity fraud. And how are you all thinking about these issues and addressing them in your respective fields or areas or institutions?
I think about this a lot. I think about it like in terms of the thing that I was referencing earlier, my like constant fear, right? When I'm writing about anything, that everyone in my tribe is going to know what I wrote about, and that I'm considering that responsibility in how I make my work. I feel like that's the thing that people who aren't actually raised with that accountability don't understand. That if there's no representation of your people, anything that is said is believed to be true. And I think about it a lot because of the fact, right, that like as a Mohegan person, like this guy, James Fenimore Cooper, wrote this book, Last of the Mohegans, like everyone assumed it was history, like, and that there were no more of us, right? Because like they based a fictional character off of my ancestor Uncas. And then based on that, because that fictional version died, like we could no longer exist. And so I'm constantly thinking about that, the importance of that, and what a complicated issue it is, because the people going into those situations, like they don't have that accountability. They don't understand why it's complicated. But if you have no representation, then anything that shows up means so much, because it's going to influence everything to do with your nation. It's going to it'll influence your very sovereignty, you know? And so I think it's a really, really important issue to take care around, because there are many people in America who have these myths that they're raised with, these myths that they, you know, might have been descended from usually a Cherokee princess. I'm sorry to but right, that's usually the myth, is like, for whatever reason, way back, even though that makes no logical sense, that's their myth. And you know, and different tribes have different rules in terms of like whether or not like roles are open or closed in terms of how people actually become members. And there's just a lot of strange mythologies around identity when it comes to Native people and our sovereignty. And so I think it's really complicated because like I feel like all of us have probably been in situations where we've had to explain to someone that they might not actually be Native, and like the circumstances under which they thought they were pretty weird to begin with. And so, yeah, I don't really have anything else to say on that. I think it's just, for me, I'm always thinking about accountability and the extreme pressure and anxiety that accountability gives me, and what different choices I would make if I didn't have that accountability, and how terrifying it would be to me if someone else went around saying that they in any way represented my people and did things. It would be completely mortifying, not only for me, but for my entire nation.
As a Native actor, I'm often asked to play so many characters that are not Cherokee. And so that also a lot of characters that are based on real human beings that are still alive today. And so, you know, once again, it's one of those complicated things because as a Native actor, if I kept waiting for Cherokee parts to come my way, I may not ever get to act unless like I did, like Maddie did, and I wrote my own play. You know, but at the same time, you know, there's a responsibility when you write or play a person that is, you may be Native, but you may create a piece that is about a different group of people, or you may be an actor, you may be asked to act in that play or in that movie, or you may be the director who's directing a piece about people that are not your own, but you're Native, so you have an idea. But you still should do the research. You know, you should still hire the dramaturgs and the consultants, and even that doesn't always save your skin. You know, and then what you have to do is you have to listen to the community. If the community comes to you, then you pivot and you make the changes. It's not always an easy thing to do, but that's what you do. And so, you know, we learn together. And I think that's, once again, I feel that's a burden we place on a lot of our Native people, is we assume that they are the ambassador of all things Native just because they might be the head of a theater organization. And the truth is, we're all learning as we go, and we need to have these conversations with each other so we can move forward. And I feel like a lot of the problems that we have is a lack of communication and a lack of that transparency. And so how do we start working together to fix the problems is, you know, my big concern. But once again, as a Native person, especially as a Native actor that's had to play, I think I played Cherokee twice now, when one was in my own show. It's a lot of research that you have to do. And once again, it's when you're hired for a film or a television show, they expect you to do that research. Although recently they are hiring consultants. Whether they listen to the consultant is a whole other thing, but they're trying. And, you know, that's what we want to encourage them to do. And of course, I think that's another reason, if you go back to the question about Hamilton and representation, is if you hire a Native person to play that role and it's not their own tribal nation, they are going to do the research because, like Maddie says, they know what it would feel like if they got it wrong. And, you know, I think that's the fear everyone has. I know it's the fear that I have, especially now that I'm working at the Autry, is try as you might, you're never going to get everything right. But how do you fix it? How do you change on a dime and make it better? And so, you know, that's something we're all learning to do. And, you know, we just have to work with it with grace and understanding and compassion. But at the same time, you know, when the community comes to you, you listen to the community.
Yes, just to build on that, I mean, I would say that, yeah, as a general rule of thumb, you know, no story about a community without that community being involved. I mean, that's just the way it is. And I personally really want to help foster many communities writing their own stories, you know, helping develop writers and artists from those communities, writing their own stories from across Turtle Island. I really think that is, I personally think that's one of the biggest projects that I am, and we all can do. And for, you know, and look, for people out there that want to try to you know, play Native or when they're not, and try to I don't know, be a faux Native. In my experience, many people that do that is because they think there's magically some money hidden somewhere. All right, we do not have like a special pot of money that others do not. Okay, like it doesn't. We wouldn't be here, right? If it did. Okay, so just take that off the table.
I will say though that it tends to be the case that the people who are doing that do somehow find the money that the actual Native people don't, which I find is the constant mystery, which is probably what reveals them to begin with.
Exactly. How do they know these insides that we don't know, that we were never taught? And going off Ryan said, my favorite joke, especially when I'm talking to a non-Native audience, because they always have this preconceived notion that there is this big pot of money and that the government writes us these amazing checks. And my joke is, the only check I ever got from the government is my tax refund, because I think that answers all the questions they have. Yes, I pay taxes. The government only sends me when I have a refund. But yes, so just once again, it's all these misconceptions that people have, and where do they get it? They don't get it from our people because they don't have those conversations. They get it from what they see. And once again, if you cast a person that is of Native descent, that is a citizen of their nation, that is active in their community, they're going to bring that authenticity to those characters.
Another question that we have from the Q&A is actually it's a question with a bit of a suggestion. How can we get high schools and colleges to produce plays about Indigenous peoples past and present?
I think this is an interesting question because I think it actually hits on two things at the same time. In that, right this year, the number of people who have emailed me looking for lists of directors because they're producing Larissa Fasthorse Thanksgiving play is actually huge. And I think that has to do with the fact that there is a real interest in this right now, but universities don't necessarily have Native students in their theater departments and things like that, right? And so that's actually a real factor. And so how do we actually also make sure that work is being done, right? That universities are actually considering the importance of having Native students in their theater departments, rather than trying to like Band-Aid solution it down at the end of the road. Teaching these plays is also really important for that reason. I'm really lucky that I'm joining ASU in the fall, where there are like more than 4,000 Native students and more than 45 Native professors. Like that's not the norm at most universities. But how do we create environments that people know are welcoming like that to go to? Because like the reason I'm going there is very largely because of that, because I know that there will be like an exciting and innovative discourse of Native voices in those environments. But I think that it's interesting because we have to think creatively in some of these situations where how do we teach a play, or how do we perform a play, or how do we make sure Native writers are also writing some plays that can be performed without Native characters so that they can still be discussing some of the issues, but discussing them in a way where redface doesn't have to occur, or discussing them in a way where we can be thoughtful and intentional with how they're being produced in those environments. Because I do think that the educational issues of not having these plays present in those educational institutions is really, really immense. So I think it's a great question to really think about how we can be intentional about that moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, first and foremost, I really do think that colleges and universities and conservatories across the board, they do need to do extra work in terms of trying to help develop and get Native performers. I mean, this is something that we just have to do. I mean, you can't be on the receiving end of hundreds of years of genocide and racism and all that, and not expect that you may have to do something extra to help help create a more just theatrical world and a more just society. So more work does need to be done in that level. And I think you'll find communities and artists, like I said, that would be willing to help in that. So I think, so that's one thing. The other thing is to help bring, Native companies on campus. That should be done more. Maybe even some colleges that have Native students that may not necessarily in performing arts, maybe they'd be interested in sharing a story or writing a story. As I shared, the event that we have coming up on Wednesday has some activists and people in other walks of life that are sharing their stories. So that's another way. Sometimes bringing other Native artists. I remember in 2014, I had the privilege of being brought down to American University in Washington, D.C. To direct students in a Native play. And, you know, it wasn't my nation, but nonetheless, I was still an honor to go down there. And a lot of the students were not Native, but it was still nonetheless an educational opportunity and a way for us to both share, reflect, and grow. So there are a number of ways of which to do this, and also to do it thoughtfully and respectfully.
And honestly, I think now is the right time to do it because there's so many Native plays that are virtual via Zoom that are also free or have a very limited cost. You know, they're very cost efficient. We could all tune in on Wednesday and watch Delana what he's talking about. And so I think we should. You know, so there's a way that you can still bring your students to a Native play that's done the Native way. In regards to teaching it, yes, please teach it. I know a lot of our plays, in order for them to be taught at schools, they have to be published, but you can also reach out to the Native playwright and ask if you can teach their play. Rihanna Yazzie did that with me recently. And so I'm not published, and I gave her access to my play. And so there's a way you can do that as well. You know, you can find a way to reach a Native artist. Having Native writers, Native playwrights come to your classroom via Zoom, which we can do now these days, is another good step. As for actually producing the play, I mean, it's very complicated. I believe Madeline talked about it, but I would say handle it the way you would an August Wilson play. If you are doing an August Wilson play and you don't have enough Black students, you wouldn't throw in someone that wasn't of the ethnicity or race. And so once again, handle it the same way as you would with other groups of people. And which is why I say, if you can't produce it, if you can't put it on stage at your college or your theater, then teach it, because you can teach it without having the actors. And also what Madeline said in the chat, I don't know if everyone got to see it, but there have been a couple of instances where, and this has happened to me and also with Mary Catherine Nagel, when they do bring in somebody, the actors or the director or the playwright, they get a say sometimes in bringing extra Native people, especially if it's an organization that doesn't have, that they have a limited pool. This way, you know, we can bring those people in and introduce them to you. And also, you know, do the outreach in your community. Native people are everywhere. The land that you are on belonged to somebody before you were there. Who were those people? Find them. I guarantee they're still around. Have those conversations. And then of course, you know, I think for me, I didn't, unlike Avalanatat and Madeline, I didn't go to school to be an actor, because that was not what someone from Oklahoma and Cherokee Nation rural community didn't have running water until I was 12. That was not an option. We don't go to school for what people consider hobbies. You know, so find a way to start recruiting those kids, right? Go to the schools, show them that you're interested, give them the opportunities and the means. You know, and once again, people always have these ideas that a lot of our people have access to scholarships. And the truth is, if you are in a remote community, who's going to help you fill out your applications? Who's going to help you with your essays if no one in your family has ever been to college? You know, how do we get to the students? How do we start at, you know, like, how do we start embracing our young Native people and raise them up so that they know that their cultural heritage is valid, and also it's an art form that they can share? And so how do we get them to embrace that, and how do we get organizations to embrace that and also help them get to the collegiate level? So I'll get off my soapbox now, but thank you.
And also, if I may add to that, when you do bring on Native artists or Native companies, either to colleges or universities or even theaters, be fair and equitable in the stipend or wage that you're offering them. I mean, just because maybe Natives have not had the platforms of other groups does not mean that we don't have, you know, bills to pay, or that we're not that we're not equal or deserving of what other groups and other artists get. I mean, I'm just saying this because I know with a lot of different things coming our way, you know, some things are fair and some things are not. And sometimes the proposals that come forward, it's like, I doubt this person would take it. If you yourself would not take that offer, please don't offer it to anybody else, Native or otherwise. I think that's just being a fair human being.
Well, we've come to the end of our time, and I'd like to give each of you an opportunity to give a final word. One of the questions, though, that I think it's important to make sure we respond to is there's a question about a link for your event on Wednesday, Ryan, if you could make sure that that's put in the Q&A or the chat, and so people have that link to your upcoming event. I want to personally thank each of our people that have been on this panel. Madeleine Sayett, Ryan Oberlanitet Pierce, Delana Studi, thank you so much. Thank you for making this easy for me, because I must say that I was rather intimidated. If this was a political discussion, you know, or a theological discussion, I would have felt as though I had a handle on things. But as someone who simply sits back and admires what you do, I wasn't sure how I was going to be the moderator, but you made it very easy. And I thank you for your responses, and may God bless each of you. If you could just share a final word with everyone here.
I just want to say thank you, Kataptam Tamawish, to Reverend Dr. Norwood, and to acknowledge that, you know, this is the New Jersey Theater Alliance, that you don't have to look far away for collaborations with Native people, right? Like we've got Dr. Norwood here, we've got Ryan here, you know, like there are stories of the land that you are on. It doesn't have to be somewhere else. The impulse is to look at the stories of the actual place that you're in. And as someone who's from the Northeast, I will tell you that like the stories and history of the Northeastern woodlands and the languages here are so beautiful and powerful, and you will gain so much from actually being able to learn and understand them and be in partnership with people like these. So I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that, because I know that within Native theater right now, things can get kind of fancy, and there'll be like lots of like buzz people where it's like, ooh, so-and-so over there, so-and-so over there, so-and-so over there. But like actually, right, the work of indigenization is looking at the place that you're standing on and the peoples of that lands. And so I feel like we should all be really grateful for being welcomed into this space, this digital space, by you. And yeah, I know I am. So thank you. Kataptam Tamawish.
I just want to say, Wado, thank you. It's always such an honor to be in a room with so many amazing Native people. And so thank you for taking the time to have this conversation with us. And thank you for the amazing questions that we had and just facilitating this dialogue, Reverend Dr. Norwood. I appreciate that. And it's been, there's nothing like being in a room of people who want to see you succeed and support and celebrate you. And so I just want to just acknowledge what it's like to be in this space. And I just want to say thank you. I appreciate it. And also check out all their work. Maddie, did you post your Where We Belong in the chat?
I didn't. I think that the powers that be might have, but I can post it just in case.
Okay, post it. And then, of course, so we have Maddie's going on now, correct? Until when?
Until July 11th.
July 11th. And we have Apilanata on Wednesday. Tomorrow we have our last play in our Festival of New Plays at Native Voices. And of course, you can still watch Super Indian. Any other thing coming up that we should plug before we go?
Well, the end of July, for those that are in the New York area, at Lincoln Center, there is the You Are Here, of which both Muriel Miguel and I are performing certain nights, and then everyone is performing on Saturday, July 29th or 30th, the last Saturday in July. Yeah.
And I love to plug this just because so many people out there say they don't know where to find the Native talent. We've just given you several avenues on how to find Native talent, so please use them. So once again, Wado, thank you.
And I just wanted to say Wanishi, both to Dr. Norwood and to Madeline and DeLanna and to New Jersey Theater Alliance and everyone here. I must say, I mean, this is very moving for me, just in the fact that New Jersey is the state of my birth. It is also the home of my nation and my people. And you know, in my lifetime, I've never had the state of New Jersey reach out to me or the Native theater artists like this. So I really do hope this is the beginning. By hearing from my elders and also within my lifetime, I have heard you know, the rough history that my nation has had with the state of New Jersey, but it isn't too late to write it. It's not too late to write it. but it is going to take action and it's going to take tenacity and work. But if we're open, we can do it. Thank you.
I would like to thank yet again the New Jersey Theater Alliance and the New Jersey Historical Commission for putting this wonderful discussion together, and for inviting these wonderfully talented Indigenous artists. I want to thank everyone for participating. Say Wanishi, thank you, and turn it back over to Deontay Griffin quick for any closing instructions or comments. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. I know we probably are getting some virtual hand claps and snaps and celebrating you all for this powerful discussion. Thank you all so much for lending your time and expertise and your experiences to this conversation. I'm so looking forward, and I know it'll be fruitful for our viewing audience and those who will watch the recording afterwards. And I just want to say too, thank you for celebrating yourselves and the work that you all are doing, but uplifting other Indigenous artists and theater makers as well, and bringing them into this space. And just for holding space with us and being in community with us is so important. So I hope everyone watching will certainly go out and support these upcoming events and projects, and stay connected to all of our panelists and follow the great work that they're doing and all of the great work I know they are still to do. To Dr. Norwood, thank you. It is always a pleasure to be in space with you and have conversations like these. So we're super grateful for your collaboration and your friendliness to New Jersey Theater Alliance, and look forward to future projects that we know we'll be able to work on with you as well. Again, thank you to the Historical Commission for this opportunity. And I want to send a special thanks to Greer Luce, who is helping us on the back end with all of our tech, and Mirabai as well for providing captioning services. Sarah, I don't know if you have closing remarks that you would like to share with folks at this time.
Deontay, I just want to thank our panelists and Dr. Norwood. What a fabulous dialogue. I look forward to seeing all the great work that our panelists will be doing, and looking for more Indigenous artists in New Jersey to add to it in the years to come. So many thanks to all of you.
Thank you. And I just want to let folks know that this recording will be available on the New Jersey Theater Alliance website after we finish tonight. And so please feel free to share that with friends, family, and colleagues. And please visit the New Jersey Theater Alliance website for more upcoming events and resources. So to everyone, have a wonderful evening, and thank you, thank you, thank you.